Welcome to Talking in Stations, podcast about EVE Online. I am Matterall, your host here with the crew. Let's get right into it with them. How's it going, Elise?
Pretty good, pretty good. I've been having a lot of fun doing these events in LowSec, but we can get into that later. Otherwise, pretty good, uneventful.
Awesome. Arsia, how about you?
I'm tired. I did a 12-hour stream last night, and I was dual boxing the whole time, so I'm calling it a 24-hour stream.
That works. All right. Also, we have Caleb with us. How's it going, Caleb?
Hey, guys. I'm just here to talk about the woke changes.
All right. Hateless, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing pretty good. It's a good day, and the event sites have been a blast over the past week.
I like your festive lights there around your neck.
Yeah, we'll talk about that if you want to.
Christmas lights popping on and off. All right. And also off screen today is Suitonia. How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. The reason why I'm off screen is because I woke up 20 minutes ago. So
we all did, but it's all right.
Yeah, I'm just not as efficient at like getting dressed,
combing your hair, right? All right, and on the in the control room is Maccloud, as always. Thanks for joining us here at Talking in Stations. Let's get started with some patch notes review, some of the stuff that's going on with CCP and that, and then we'll talk about some stuff going on with the Bloodlines, and then of course we're going to hit the Winter Nexus expansion that is out now. Some of the event, we'll talk about how to do a good job there, and then we'll get into some more news. Okay, let's get started. First thing on the docket is the patch notes. So this is 18.12, patch notes version 18.12. And the big parts of the patch are the Winter Nexus, which is the event that's happening now. You also had localization for Japanese, which was highly celebrated by CCP. They did a lot of firework displays and stuff. And then there was a lot of changes. What stuck out in these patch notes?
There was one thing that actually affected me personally, and I was really confused by it. There's a line in there, I don't remember exactly, but it and it has since been reverted. But it said they had fixed what they considered to be a bug with being able to set a home station to a system that had no cloning facilities. And I didn't know that was a bug that's been in the game for roughly 4 years. It's been around ever since Citadels have been put into the game, where you can just like right click at the top of a station, no matter what station you're in, and hit set home station, and your home clone would be there. Most people set that to Jita 4.4. So
why would they set that to 4.4, by the way?
Oh, just so when you die, you end up right back into Jita 4.4, so you can go buy stuff and go out and die again. Or, I mean, for other reasons, right? If you're in nullsec and you're deployed somewhere, you can shove it in a Citadel or an NPC station, regardless if it has closing or not.
Yeah, that's significant because sometimes you have entire constellations that have like stations that don't have cloning facilities, and people would want to live there maybe without having a Citadel. So you could set your home system, even without the cloning bay, you could set your home to that, and then when that change happened, you couldn't.
Yeah, so in ye olden times, whenever we would deploy to NPC nullsec, we could only choose stations that had cloning facilities, because when we died, we wanted to make sure we would go back to where we were staging. And some of them, most notably in XTAC 7 in Pureblind, the only station there with cloning is also a kickout. So it's like, oh, do you want to live in a kickout, or do you want to be able to die and come back? Anyway, so that got changed. And they removed that as a bug, and it was just like this weird line item. And I had tried to set a clone because I wanted to like death clone back and forth to grab stuff, and it wouldn't let me. And I was like, this is weird. I don't remember this in the patch.
So if my clone is set to Jita and I change that, I won't be able to set it back to Jita again?
For that one day, you could not. So a few people posted on the EVE Online forums. Good. I posted on Reddit just making people aware of it. I didn't mean to like sound like a complaining person. And CCP went in, looked at it. They said, oh, wow, a lot of people think this sucks. So they went and changed it instantly. So like the next day it was fixed again. So
wow, so that was you? You're the one that found this?
I mean, I didn't find it. I just
a lot
posted.
of people simultaneously. Yeah. But like way back in the day, you wouldn't want your clone to be at somewhere without cloning service, because when you died, you needed to buy the new clone, right? You needed to upgrade the clone state, or else you'd lose SP. But after that,
gonna go back to training.
Yeah, after that went away, it was whatever, because you just wanted to set your clone wherever you could set your clone, because you didn't need to buy a new clone state. And yeah, it's just good they reverted it.
I think a lot of people were having fun at the fact that they had just like revamped Jita and or Jita 4.4. Like they gave this beautiful graphical overhaul. It's now like this huge city center almost type of feel, and it has no cloning. So if you wanted to clone into Jita for that one day, you'd have to set your clone to Jita 4.6. So you'd have to go to this lowly other shitty station that had cloning in it. But yeah, so CCP said, yeah, it was a matter of someone finding this bug and fixing it and not realizing the implications of how the players used it. But they corrected that really fast. I was shocked at how fast they corrected it. Like I've seen things like this go on for weeks. But yeah, no, it just went the next day. And also went with it was the other big change, which was to drones. And that was an announced change, right? So essentially the short of it is drones would no longer auto aggress in PvE situations, right? So you couldn't just go out in a Vexer and then orbit around and drop your sentries and have them keep going. CCP announced that they were getting. Oh, sorry.
So this really sucked when they did this. They reverted it within 2 days. But what happened was there's an essential role in both PvP and PvE called a drone bunny. This person is in charge of the drones. You assign your drones to this pilot, and this pilot's role in the fleet, their specific purpose is to have the drones kill targets. This is really important in incursions, or any PvE group really relies on this role to make their drones actually work instead of having to do them backwards. And this broke that mechanic unintentionally, I feel. I made a video on it, and then Dopamine was like, oh, we didn't realize this, or something like that. But yeah, it was interesting that happened.
It was definitely hugely unpopular, right? So it's interesting that CCP were just like, yeah, okay, we'll change it back. It's fine. We'll come up with a better solution. And it's not that they're like ditching the ideas forever, right? They said we're going to come up with a more elegant solution or a better solution sometime later. So you really do hear or do see especially the community team listening to what the players are saying and then taking that and making like something actionable come out of it, which is it's very kind of refreshing to see. Obviously, this doesn't happen all the time, but it was kind of neat to see it happen twice in like 2 days.
So we can talk about like what the drone change was, why it hurt people in just a second, but the idea that they would recognize players' unease with a change in two different things and then revert them rather quickly. The clone one was really quick. The drone one took a couple more days maybe, and they said even credited the players' concerns that were valid, and they also credited the CSM for essentially bringing it to their attention. You can see it that way, or you can say for applying pressure to the company to say, like, this doesn't work for us. We're not going to suffer through this one. And here are the reasons why. And CCP agreed those reasons are pretty valid. As you guys know, because you guys use this all the time. What do you think of their speed in fixing something that players didn't agree with?
I think that it's a good thing, because there's a lot of games out that don't listen to their player base, and I think that it's a good thing that they're able to listen to their player base and respond to what their players want. And they're really trying to walk that fine line of trying to make the game more entertaining and your time more valuable in the game plan and keep people happy. And they're walking a fine line, and they're actually listening to their players. That's really important, especially in development of games like this. And I'm happy to see it.
Anyone disagree?
I mean, obviously it's good that they listen, right? But it's I'm curious that why they're listening to these things and not other things, and like what was the incentive for? Was it really the CSM saying, "Hey guys, you really screwed the pooch on this one. You gotta do something about it," or was it just the devs were like, "Oh wow, this didn't do what we wanted it to do. Crap." I'd just really be interested to see what the impetus was to make those changes, because if it's the community being loud, that's definitely not always the case. People complain about stuff all the time. I specifically complain about changes. Like I was really vocal about it in April when there was like the change to abandoned citadels. I thought that was super dumb and I got called out for it. But I mean, that never got changed. So I'm just curious as to what the scenario is. But I'm like otherwise very happy that it's happening and the speed at which it's happening. And also, I'm also proud of the community in a sense as well, because the complaining wasn't like a lot of pitchforks Gur subbing. It seemed a lot of reasonable people saying, "Hey, this is why this sucks. This specifically is what you broke. We know that this is not what you wanted to break. So here, take this." Because dealing with CCP and dealing with any gaming company, it's a two-way street, right? You can't just have the community team on CCP doing everything, right? The community itself also has to facilitate that transfer of information in a meaningful way.
What about you, Caleb? What's your opinion about CCP's looking at the situation and reverting a couple of really key elements to this expansion?
I think it's a little bit of a cop-out, but my tinfoil hat is telling me that they might be a little bit scared about what's going to happen post-COVID. When we get into quarter 1, 21, things are going to change a lot, and I think they might have worried a little bit of how horrible the numbers could end up if something like this feature is removed, because I think that could actually impact things like the PCU quite horribly. I think rolling back a feature like this that potentially had some really big effects on the overall game, I think it's a mistake. And a bit like Elise said, it's weird that it took, 3-4 months to get them to revert the blackout. And this is like almost instantly. It feels strange. I think I can understand that some people are opposed to this feature, but I think the upsides massively outweighs the downsides and the force to adapt. I think it's sad that they rolled this back.
Yeah, I'm a little upset they did it too, although I guess I can understand it. I think that I think they're happy with the fact that drones don't auto-aggress. What they're unhappy with is the assist and guard functionality getting broken, because that really hurts just casual multi-boxing, right? Like you have a battleship on your main and then you have a Dominix on an all that assists drones to your main. You can't really do that. And the incursion stuff. But yeah, I was really really looking forward to this change to see what it would do to like ADMs once people can't run like multiple Ishtars or run them AFK, and like hopefully seeing like the price of Plex dropping as multi-boxers don't multi-box these like big drone farms anymore, and then like the value of ISK rising too. So yeah, I'm a little disappointed in the fact that CCP rolled it back, but not because like I think that they're copping out or something. I think it's completely reasonable that they rolled it back. It's just I was really looking forward to what the changes were going to do to the EV ecosystem.
And what do you think? Go ahead, Arsia, and then we'll come back. I want to know what you think those changes would have been.
Say, that I saw like some things, like I saw somebody ratting with a bunch of Apocalypse navies, and our first thought was that somebody bought all these in a snap response to the drone change, and then it was like rolled back 2 days later.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think, like, because like this was a fairly major change, and like I think it would have a lot of big effects on the game. I'm gonna say I'm like disappointed that it was rolled back, but I do think it is kind of weird that like this one was listened to and changed after just a couple days, when other changes that people have disliked en masse have persisted for long periods of time. But I do think it's strange that they would announce it in such a overt way that they did, and to the point where like people are like adjusting for it and doing stuff like buying the Apocalypse navies.
Yeah.
And then they just change it like right away after maybe people have like poured money into like adjusting and such, and without maybe seeing the long-term effects of it.
Well, on Discord, we had a guy say that he had drained all his drone skills, 66 million skill points. He had drained them all, and he was moving those skills somewhere else. And then they reverted the change. And so for him, I said, you need to petition CCP. And I think if you bought a bunch of different ships, that's not going to be something you can reverse. But if you did something as dramatic as taking all your skill points out, that's something that probably the company can help you with. But that's how EVE players work. They see something they need to adapt to, and they change. So CCP needs to be careful not to bounce around what the development path is, because people plan for it. I wanted to move over to Suitonia to see what he thought the repercussions were.
For the drone changes?
Yeah, you were going to get to something, and I think I cut you off.
Oh, I was just mentioning, I think we talked about it last week on the show, but there's a lot of potentially cool things that might happen with the drone changes, such as, for example, being harder for people to maintain ADMs, which might make like a bunch of Solve easier to attack. Like if people can no longer multi-box as effectively, there'll be no doubt that some multi-boxers will pack it in, and that will lower the demand of Plex, and that might make Plex easier to afford. At the same time, with like work becoming more valuable, it would also like make each individual unit of ISK worth more. So then that could also apply pressure to Plex as well, right? So like I was really looking forward to like maybe seeing like Plex prices drop and like ADMs drop maybe, and like some fun stuff happening.
So since Suitonia is like the brain on this, what would you expect them to do instead? Like, do you have any idea what they might be thinking of doing instead of this?
I have. Oh, sorry. You go, Hateless.
One idea is to do like the VNI. The VNI used to be like the king of AFK ratting. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, everybody used to orbit in a VNI. They buffed the crap out of the VNI, and at the same time made it a not viable ratting ship. Maybe they need to do something similar to the ships that do that. So
like, I feel like just attacking drones isn't necessarily going to completely get rid of low effort multi-boxing
no, definitely not.
When like auto-targeting missiles are still a thing, right? Because if you just got drones, we're going to have more golems for me to kill, basically.
So the reason why auto-targeting missiles aren't used is because you have to pay attention to them. They actually aren't as AFK friendly as you think. You have to make sure that the NPCs lock you, and you also have to make sure that every time it reloads, you have to hit the button again. You have to tell it to start firing. It's like 10 shots is how much fit in a launcher. So
but I have seen multiple instances of different people who do run like a bunch of targeting. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, people do it.
People will adjust, right? And
it's not effective. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Well, and auto-targeting missiles are also balanced in the fact that they do less DPS than the normal missiles, right?
Significantly, yeah. It's like 40% or 20 or 25% less.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I actually suggested, like in CCP's like partnership thing. I suggested maybe making it so CCP doesn't let the Tech 2 drones like do the auto aggro stuff, but you like maybe let faction drones do that, and Tech 1. So then that way, like if you're running, if you're using Tech 2, you have to be at the keyboard. But if you're using like Tech 1 or the cheaper faction ones, you can do it AFK, and in that way there would be like more of a trade-off between like active drone batting and.
What if there was AFK drones that automatically did the targeting or automatically did things like the drone behavior now for PvE, and then there was the active drones that we have now?
Just a small question. Isn't there also a little bit of an economic problem that they're maybe too cheap, considering that they actually don't have any ammo?
That's the whole point. Drones are free,
But I think the thing that you guys, what you are suggesting that have in common is that you could AFK, but you would do it at a much slower rate, and it would be
you take a penalty.
I think the solution is to change the content so it's more engaging and requires you to be at the keyboard, as opposed to just hitting the features of the game when the content is in a state that you just kind of want to mindlessly grind it as opposed to enjoy it.
The interesting thing about that is they have the AI already in the game. They've had it for some time that hates drones, right? So we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but if you go into these new event sites and try and, even if you bring a Gila, which has yoked out drones, like super strong drones, they will decimate those drones the instant they come out. They just hate drones. The Abyss also hates the drones, but you can manage it with a Gila, not so much really anything else. But yeah, they absolutely hate drones. And even if you take a Gecko and a Gila, you can't expect to finish the site with your drone alive, right?
Gecko and a rattlesnake, and they're about a cruiser and puppets.
Yeah,
I've seen them out.
These things, they have the AI to kill the drone. So like I think that's not really their issue. They're just trying to find that line, because I think Suitonia mentioned something that's hugely important that a lot of people might not be considering, because this is kind of like the unfun version of Savor, the unfun part of it, right? The unfun element, unspoken element. Maybe that's better, because it's not necessarily unfun. But when you're invading someone, as we see going on between Pappy and Imperium and Delve, you see a lot of that fighting centers around iHubs, removing infrastructure, and then especially the Pappy strategy is to keep your iHub up until it gets to Defense 3, so you can put in your jammer, and then you go after a Keep Star. That's essentially the blueprint that Pappy has to invade the Imperium. In order to do that, though, to keep your iHubs alive, there's a lot of skirmishing going on, especially on the smaller side, to either impact the ADMs negatively or to build the ADMs back up. So you'll see fleets every few hours going into these systems and just ratting, right? They're just running anomalies to try and build the ADMs up. And then you see other people camping these gates to try and make sure that those ADM or those sites don't get run to drag those ADMs back down. Because when the ADMs start leaking and sagging, then you have a bigger window in which you can, mess with it and reinforce it and stuff like that. And the shorter it takes. We saw, I think it was last week, the Pappy forces went into T5s or went into 1DQ, where the ADM is insane, like maxed out, completely yoked, and they went to go for the iHub there just to reinforce it to see what would happen. And that timer was prohibitively long, to the point that the Imperium were able to form up a massive force and throw the 2,000 people that were in there out. Right, so that's like a weird little element in here.
So if we're gonna mention the ADM, there was a balance pass on it on Tuesday, which increased the modifier, making it easier to sustain higher industry ADM and easier to sustain a better bounty modifier with your ADM. So the balance has been buffed for those players.
Yeah, the industry one, there's actually a huge kerfuffle about the industry one too, because at some point during one of the and I don't have a firm understanding of exactly the mechanics of it, but essentially belts are no longer spawning in certain areas of space, making it literally, until this patch, making it literally impossible to have a mining ADM anywhere to get any of the sites that you need. So
yeah, the only way was to rely on the random belt spawning, or for you to put an Athanor down. And in many cases, in some systems that are affected by Providence, there isn't very good moons, so people don't really want to be forced to mine R16s to be able to just maintain a belt in the system.
So they added a lot of anomalies, which is good.
Yeah, there's a new anomaly actually in every single nullsec system in the game, which is just a small Arkner and Bistot deposit. I think it has 160k M3, So and I'm not sure what the respawn time on it is, but that should easily be enough to maintain like the level 1 industry in the system, which decays at like I think you need to mine is it 250k M3 a day? For level 2 it used to be 1 million M3 of ore, but I assume that they probably dropped that now.
Not exactly
hit
sure,
level 2.
actually.
Well, they actually added anomalies to null sec, low sec, and high sec, I think.
Yeah, they added ice to high sec. They added additional
Ice to high sec, but to low sec, they had their, I think it was
Jasper.
Yeah, for the
Thank you.
Noxium.
Yeah, so for the Noxium, right? I always go by the mineral, not the asteroid. But the idea is to put a little more into those areas that those areas are supposed to be good at. So nullsec has certain minerals, and that's the ones that they put in there. And lowsec has certain minerals, and those are the ones they put there. And then the ice change is kind of a big deal for high sec. This is all part of this patch that came through.
I'd just like to address the elephant in the room just for a second, because
It's a cat.
I always found that the whole ADM system and the design that CCP put in there, of course, from a game perspective, you might argue that it's okay, but it really makes no sense that the more activity and the more that you shoot, the more you get. It's really so upside down. I would really hope that they start looking at this and turning it on its head, because it's not that I don't see any benefit with ADM and with an activity bonus. I just think that bonus should be on, say, something as fundamental as how difficult you are to kill or how much damage you can output, right? Something like that. The same with the industry. The fact that the industry index is this linear thing. It should benefit you, but not necessarily the environment. So it should make your structures more efficient or your skills more efficient, but it shouldn't make any other changes. I think CCP really needs to revisit all of these modifiers and make them more realistic and sane, and make them something that can create emergent gameplay instead of this backwards, upside down world.
Well, hold on. Some of the things that you're talking about are, hold your thought, Hateless, because I'm sure it's a great thought, is that the more that you kill pirates, the more they show up, which doesn't make any sense, that kind of stuff. Like they should actually spread out, because doesn't DBS, the dynamic bounty system, kind of spread you out mechanically, even if it's not lore based?
Well, you should, in my opinion, the better you are and the more active you are in your system, the less rats should be available. But the effect could also be made by just saying, okay, you are actually getting better at defending your own space and killing these rats. So you just get a damage modifier, a defense modifier, so you can go and grind these things and remove them fast. It's like, if you're thinking like farming, if you are upgrading your efficiency of how you farm, that doesn't mean that you can farm more. It means that you can farm it faster. You're still going to deplete and destroy the soil unless you replenish it, right? You're not getting free extra farms. You should just be able to clear them faster.
Right. Or the technology is actually you farm more efficiently so you don't destroy the environment as quickly or something like that. But there's some trade-off. You don't just get more and more and more and more. It doesn't stack like that. Okay, hey, let's go ahead.
Okay, so on the trade-off part, the most recent thing that was just spoken about, the DBS does exactly that. If you farm the fields down, so to speak, the DBS goes down, you get no bounty. It goes away. But I agree with you, Caleb. I completely agree with you. As you get better at farming and as you have more players farming, you definitely need those players to be forced to spread out rather than come together and become dense. That makes it so that when there's a bigger group or a larger alliance or when your group grows, the space to support that group also has to grow. And that makes it so that you actually have to control a footprint rather than just one small spot.
Or build out more infrastructure. I'd be fine with that. This is why I hope that they put minerals back in moons and make the whole moon system take over from the wildlife stuff. Because I think if there are more farms to actually aggress and burn, that also creates an incentive to disrupt and attack your enemy.
Yeah, and then space will become valuable again. Each system will matter.
There it is. We solved it. Done. Let's get coffee.
You just need a dynamic mining system now, right? that it changes the yield based on like how much has been mined recently.
Because
Yeah,
it makes sense that if you're very active in mining and you're very good at all that stuff, that should affect your structures, the quote unquote farms that you have built, right? So the more land you take over from wild, so the more forest you cut down, the more farms you create, and that is where you get your yield, and that is something that you can benefit from. But that should be something that can be destroyed by your enemy. That is the key factor that I think CCP are aware, but they're just so afraid to make these big changes, just like we saw with drones, right? They're
I wonder
really
why.
not happy about making massive changes, even though I do get the feeling that the ecosystem team, they know what they want. They just don't really seem to know how to introduce it in a way that doesn't make people flip table and rage face.
You know what I want? I want them to put minerals back into the moons, but then make it so Athanors only have 2 timers, so it's like shooting a POS back in the day.
Yeah,
It's like I
I
think the
would
big
like
problem,
to,
right, is like how awful it is basically to remove Athanors from a system because you have to show up 3 different times. So it's like really difficult to burn them down, right? Whereas if Athanors were kind of like just had like 1 timer, so you could just shoot them down within it, you know, you reinforce them, the next day you come and burn it. I think that would be like really fun.
yeah, and the whole thing of the fracking and the fracking frequency, and maybe making it so that the players can actually hack or aggress, and then it forces the fracking to happen prematurely, which affects the yields. There's so many things you can do with the moon mining. I have said before many times, I think the moon mining platform and a player-controlled resource node is the biggest innovation that has ever been done in MMO games, and the fact that CCP has not figured out how to bank on that in a massive way is a tragedy, because it is really so smart.
Right. All right. I love listening to you guys. I gotta say, I said it before the show, I'll say it after the show, and I'll say it during the show. So interesting.
And there's one problem with the current Athanor system as well, is that it's very hard to extract wealth from a moon in the very short term. So if you burn down someone's Athanor, you then have to hold that moon for like 60 days or something before you can, like, you know, get a max extraction on it, and that's like way too long. Like, I kind of wish CCP would like readjust the algorithm a lot more for it to be like a lot more like friendly if you have like really small cycle timers, so it's a lot more possible and efficient for you to like burn down someone's Athanor, put one up of your own, and then like moon mine it a week later, and then like take a lot of the stuff from it.
Well, the problem is if it never gets interrupted and you have a really fast economic engine. Go ahead, Caleb. Sorry.
No, it's just they really should start thinking about it a lot more like farming, right? The choice of crop, this is why I really want them to put in some sort of agency. So the way that you frack, the frequency of your fracking, the type of platform you use for the fracking, all of these things, and even rigs that can upgrade and get you better yields. So you are choosing what crop you are actually farming for, right? And this is also linked to what Suitonia said about, well, you can grow something like bamboo that takes like no time, right? Or you can grow something that's more like husbandry that takes forever to reach maturity. They need to think of this like farming, and I think that's also something that could make it a lot more fun to be managing and owning these types of structures. It could bring a whole new aspect to, call it, industry, if moon fracking and moon management was a lot more like an actual mini farming game, and something that can be attacked and swapped over, and then someone will try to actually either disrupt your income stream, or they will try to siphon and steal from you, or just raise the thing to the ground. There's so many things you can add to this gameplay that I think CCP has kind of forgotten, and I'm pretty sure that was the original plan.
I will say I don't think they've forgotten, because I've been in, I'm sure Suitonia can attest to this as well from being on the CSM. When you get someone, a developer at CCP, talking about what they could do, right? Like if you just give them that hypothetical, hey, you've got a magic button, you have infinite resources, you can do anything you want in the game, what would you do? And a lot of them do come back down to like these nifty ideas with just how resources work and what you do in the game. It just unfortunately it comes down to manpower, right? So I don't think it's complete ignorance or just forgetting. I know specifically CCP Rise has some great ideas that Caleb, you would probably just be very happy about. I think one of the ideas, like I pushed him in a corner at FanFest and bullied him a little bit. Not really. We talked about Eve stuff. It wasn't bullying. He liked it. He was like, yeah, I think if you have a bunch of like citadels and doing a lot of industry, it's like you should have some sort of weird space radiation or space trash that just destroys the area that you're in to force you to move around. So like the ideas are there.
Why not put them on, seriously, why not put them on some sort of blueprint, right? Similar to reactions. So you get this raw material from your fracking, and these things can be chosen where to actually refine them into what, and then put some sort of time limits on them. So you have this granularity and this agency and more investment required. So it feels more like an engaging activity. This is of course the exact opposite of the old school AFK mining, but I just think it's more engaging if you build out these things, if you invest these things, and then you suddenly have something that is as valuable as the old AFK system, but it just requires more infrastructure, more risk, and more labor. But ideally, you get more. It took them forever to start nerfing anomalies, and they were like basically free vertical farms, right, with infinite resources. We know this. This is how we got here, right? Well, it took them forever to start really looking at nerfing them. So why not start boosting moon mining a ton more?
It could be an issue of mechanics. Going back to what Elise says, and this is what Fozzie has also said publicly, is all things are possible with time and money, and because you hire a dev team and you play out these ideas, and I think it's actually an issue of resources. I do like the idea, and Hilmar has even said he likes the idea. He's the executive, or he's the CEO of CCP, that creating space trash you can dump on somebody else's lawn, and so you can have industry used as an offensive weapon, for your neighboring, because you got to put that nuclear waste somewhere. So you just got to dump it on the state next to you instead of in your area.
Make someone else New Jersey.
Yeah. All right. Any last words on the patch that went through? I have one if you don't. Arsia, you must be excited about Japanese localization.
I mean, it's good. It's a positive change. I speak Japanese, but I speak English better. Yeah. So I could already play fine.
Any thoughts on rupture implants, Suitonia? Because those were added into the game now, and you can actually use them. I haven't played with them yet.
Still pretty hard to get your hands on them at the moment, though, right? Because they're already dropping from the event sites. Yeah. They're pretty rare and they're pretty expensive.
They are unfortunately getting cheaper and cheaper by the day.
The low-grade ones are actually fairly cheap.
These are capacitor. Please describe them. They're capacitor implants. Is that right?
Yeah, they give the standard rates. So I think it's 15, 25, and 37% bonuses, low, mid, and high, to your capacitor regeneration, which is insanely useful for facts. Like everybody just their minds went straight to facts, but that extra capacitor frees up a module slot or two on just about every single ship in the game. If you are looking at it from a PvE standpoint, we use a lot of batteries. We use a lot of things that completely triple a fit because we're trying to make them cap stable, or completely triple a fit because we're trying to get enough capacitor on it to be comfortable. This would make a lot of fits feel really comfortable without committing so much extra into capacitor mod. So it frees up a lot of things. It's an extremely flexible implant that I foresee having a lot of uses and potentially replacing what I personally use in my mission running and my personal farming, as it's more flexible. It can do more things than just armor or just shields or just signature or just one thing, which is what the other implants seem to do. I definitely am excited for these ones.
Well, PvE, which is a lot of the things that you do, usually have active tanks, which means you are constantly repairing yourself. You need capacitor energy to repair yourself. Whereas in nullsec or PvP, you need to resist for a long period of time. So you have a passive tank where you just can't, you have such armor or a shield that you can just take a ton of damage before you die, but you're not really thinking about repairing yourself because you could never keep up with the amount of damage that's being volleyed at you.
In smaller PvP, you do active tanks, like a lot of smaller scale PvP. In large fleets, you want to have the buffer not to get volleyed because you usually have a lot of logistic ships that repair you. But these are going to be really good for smaller scale, solo, small gang, micro gang PvP, where you do have the active reps. Cap is life in a lot of different situations, and there's a lot of PvP situations where that's also the case.
What'd you say, Hateless?
Logi pilots are going to love this across the board. Every single Logi pilot will like these. The Savior implants are stupidly expensive, and I really hope that these ones are relatively cheap. But
repairing other people's ship takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, it burns a lot of cap, like an insane amount.
Yeah, and the cool thing about these, as Hateless mentioned, is you're not locking yourself into a playstyle by picking them up. So if you're a Logi, but you also do like PvE, ratting, or anything else, like a Savior set is not going to help you at doing anything outside of being Logi. Whereas this like Cap regen fit, it can help you be Logi, but it's also going to help your PvE, or if you fly like any other PvP ship, it's still going to be very useful.
So, Maccloud, I do see that you're highlighting the percentages there on the show. All those like the 1, 2, and all the little percentages with the modifiers all added together. When you total up all those implant totals together, I believe it's Suitonia, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 15, 25, and 37.5 is a bonus when you add up all the totals of those little bonuses multiplied together, right?
I think so. I'm not too sure, but I think with cap regen, you have to be really careful because it works in a really weird way. It's like a inverse thing.
It's multiplicative. It's a lot more.
Yeah. So like negative minus 37.5%, it ends up being like a 60% bonus to your total cap regeneration.
Is that the bonus when you're at peak regeneration, when you're sitting around like 32%, or like?
So, do you want me to explain the equation?
Yeah, because you scientists got way past me, and if you got past me, you got past the audience too. So break it down.
If people don't,
if you're confused, then just know that having the high grade implant set basically increases the amount of cap you regenerate by 60%.
Okay, done. So your cap regeneration, you're given an average cap regeneration. That's how much cap you regenerate. But if you take your capacitor amount and divide it by the cap recharge time, and then multiply that by 2, you get your peak regen. That's how much you regenerate total, and that's why Suitonia is saying the times 2. That's the part of the equation that comes from. The peak regen is always between 25 and 30%. I don't remember the exact number. I think it's like 27.5 or something like that. I'm not sure, but it's somewhere between 25 and 30%. So I always say that once you're below 30, you're broken. You've spent too much. That's kind of a safe number, but you can push a little bit lower. But it does peak in that window between 25 and 30%. And it looks like Maccloud has brought up the equation right there. And then there's also a graph that shows peak regen on right to the right there. That's an image is a little bit easier to visualize than the, there you go.
Okay. So where you'll get these things, we've been talking about the implant sets. They're called the Rapture implant set. So now this finalizes it out. Every pirate race has 2 different implant sets that they offer. Everything except for the Rapture right now is offered through the LP stores as well. So that's generally how you get these ones. During this event, as Suitonia mentioned, you can get the actual BPCs to build the implants, the Rapture implants, by doing the event. And the event actually has 2 different, actually, I guess technically 3 different elements to it, right? There's a mining event that's tangled with it where you can mine and to do stuff. There's exploration part of it where you can go out in Astradios or in Astero and find these things in the volatile ice storms. And then there's, what I've been doing is the PvE events called the White Storm Muster Points. They're available in null-sec, low-sec, and high-sec. The best rewards are actually in the low-sec ones. Like a lot of people would assume it would be in null-sec because that's like outlaw space and dangerous, but nope. The best rewards you can get are actually from the ones in low-sec. And you do these sites you can do them. I think if you try and activate the gate, it suggests you take a Tech 2 fit battleship. That's not necessarily the case. You can do it if you're alone. I would suggest like a very tanky or sturdy.
300 million is Vagabond. Check out my workbench.
Yeah, that works too. Like a Vaga works. I did it as Sleipnir. A Tengu can work just fine. Loki can do it just fine as well. If you're taking something like a healer, you're going to have a bad time. But you can tinker with them in high sec first to figure out what fit you want, and then you can go on to low sec. It's important to know that you have to be in the actual weather element, or actually in the actual storms, the event storms, for these things to spawn. But once you're in one of them, either you can take a filament there, which is a new thing to like careen yourself through them so you don't have to get stuck in gate camps, or you can just like fly around and find them yourself if you want. That's fine too. You can see where they are on the map, right? So you just open up the map, look for storms, go there.
You're looking for ice storms, right?
Yeah, the ice storms. I think they're just metaliminal storms.
In high and null, the only storms that are spawning are ice, or in high and low. The only storms that are spawning are the ice storms. So you open up your map, sort by multiliminal storms. You can find them on the map. They're pretty easy to locate.
Oh, good point, because they're not labeled. Elise, sorry about that.
Yeah, Maccloud's looking at the map right now. The red is the center of the storm, so it has the strongest effect. The orange is the neighboring one. They have the same effect, and in the description, it says that it's supposed to be a little bit less in the orange, and then the yellow also has the effect that's reduced. And whenever you take a filament, you end up in a red system.
Yeah, so you get to the center storm, and they move daily, right? So they take the gate system the same way storms do. It's a weird mechanic that got introduced earlier this year, but the storms take gates because that's what the storms do. But anyways, when you're in them, that's where you'll find all these event sites. They're not very difficult. I think 2 people in fairly cheap fit ships can run them in about 10 minutes. And in terms of rewards, the rewards are actually really, really good. I think this is a great money-making opportunity for people that want to get out there and do some PvE.
New bros especially. If you're new, go pick up a Praxis and go have some fun. It's really cheap and easy to get into. And
so in terms of just how much you make, I got it down with me and alt doing a site in 6 minutes, and the income that you make, at least in the low sec ones, the average across about 50 of them was just above 220 mil. Per site. That's every 6 minutes. And because just of how they're distributed, there's always going to be one in one of these storms, right? So I'm in a system right now that's weak, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 7 storms, right? So you'll clear one, another one will spawn in 5 minutes.
7 sites.
Yeah.
Yeah,
7 sites. Sorry,
there's plenty in low sec to go around. In high sec, they're highly contested. So the way to win the contest, I'm going to give you guys all the hint right now, but the way to win the contest is to do the most damage. So bring something that applies to battleships well. You also have to be able to track the frigates to clear the site if you're alone. So all the loot comes out of the battleship at the end. It is all about doing the most damage possible to that battleship.
Yeah,
I find that the biggest concern is to be able to track the frigates, because the battleship's easy to deal with because you can hit it. But I see most of the people I see dying are dying because they can't hit the frigates or can't apply to the frigates. And as long as you keep that in mind, it should be pretty easy. So
a grapple plus a web on a battleship will equal tracking and the ability to hit the frigates.
The NPC AI is actually the smart AI, I guess, for the NPCs. That means they'll warp off and perch. They newt, web, and scram in low sec, at least. And the final boss, he also has a pretty heavy newt that goes out, I think, to 40 kilometers. And if you try and kite him, he'll just warp off and warp back onto you. So trying to do like cheese kite strategies won't necessarily work. They also really hate drones, as we mentioned earlier. So if you take a Gila, you're going to be defanged pretty quickly if you're not paying attention to it. But yeah, a lot of good ISK. You'll average about 2 bill ISK an hour plus when you get
in low sec. If you're really effective, if you're effective in low sec, you can get income like that. In high sec, they also scram, and they also disrupt, and they also nuke. I've seen as much as 30 gigajoules of incoming cap pressure in a high sec site. with a cap battery. That means, I think after the math of the cap battery, that equals roughly 40 gigajoules of cap pressure as possible. The battleship hits like a truck. It is dangerous. In low sec, it's even more dangerous. It does enough damage to break a pretty well-fit battleship. And then the site, you can expect between 300 and 400 or 400 and 500 incoming DPS from both the spawns and that battleship that you have to fight.
And so one thing I noticed when we were running around with just a small group of battle cruisers and cruisers doing the sites as we were like kind of looking around for people to fight in Losec, is that when you're doing the sites with a bunch of people and you spread out, they'll start pinging a lot because they ping to prevent people from kiting. So they warp like 400 off and then warp on top of you. But every time they change targets, if that target's a bit away, they ping. So when you're flying with multiple people, if you're not together, they will be bouncing all over the place, and it's a bit of a pain in the butt. So pointing them is actually really, really helpful when you're running them in a group, pointing the rats that you're fighting so they can't warp off.
Yeah, that does prevent them from doing that ping maneuver, which is neat. Another interesting thing about these event sites, they're like slightly different than event sites that have happened in the past, right? Before, some of them, especially, they feel very much feast or famine, right? You'll run like 5 or 6 of them and get nothing in terms of loot, and then you'll hit that one jackpot. The jackpots are now more evened out, I guess. So the lowest I ever got, I think, was 140 mil from a drop, and the highest was about 300. So they're pretty even in there, and you're never going to be like running one of these sites and getting nothing, or wasting your time and just hoping to get a jackpot. No, it's a lot more even and steady, which is something that CCP has like purposely iterated on. Right, they're trying to find that perfect balance between what makes these sites enjoyable. So mini lotteries are now out for this one, and it's much more consistent. Which is a very neat thing to do.
Oh, the hypercore system. I really like that. HyperCoreNet or no? HyperNet.
HyperNet, yeah.
HyperNet last year introduced. Anyway, the one of the things that I think it was, again, CCP Fozzie that talked about in public on I forget what it was, maybe a CCP stream or a podcast, that they were going to make the Christmas time lucrative, and this is how they're doing it with this event. So these rewards should be pretty rewarding, maybe the most rewarding in the year. So
no, Crimson Harvest was far more profitable.
Was it? Okay, I heard that was very profitable. So can we talk about how people can get involved? You've given some advice on what to use and stuff, but how do they actually get in there at least and do things?
So they actually made it really nice and very easy, right? So the CCP also introduced a new filament, which is going to be used for a completely different purpose most of the time. But there's a new filament that'll take you, if you want it. There's like a solo one. I think it goes up to 5, maybe 10 people. I actually haven't looked through the
10 people for Losec is the largest filament that I saw.
It's 1, 5, or 10. So those are your 3 sizes.
Gotcha. So you can get filaments the size of 1, 5, or 10 that'll take you directly to these weather environments, be it in nullsec, they're labeled nullsec, lowsec, or highsec. So if you are stuck somewhere and you're like, I don't feel like going all these jumps, you can just filament in and make that jump, and then you'll be in these actual elements. And then my suggestion, always have a high-sec one with you for when you want to go home. So you can just, after you're done for the day, just go boosh one of these high-sec ones and you'll be back in high-sec. Not exactly what you want, right? Because it's just a random spot in high-sec.
Would recommend multiple, because sometimes you end up like 40 jumps away from where you want to be.
Solitude or Iridia Island, right?
Yeah, that counts.
Or a high-sec island, that does happen as well.
Iridia Island, yeah, the Mishi Island, right?
But you will be going to a site that has the weather element in there, right? So the storm. So you'll at least know generally the area of the map that you'll go to. But yeah, definitely bring some. But yeah, so they made it very easy. And so I know a lot of the people that had a hard time with the other ones or the other sites, especially the ones that were null sec or low sec, you couldn't really get there, right? So if you were a solo person or a small group trying to take a nice ship through Tama, for instance, that wasn't going to happen, right? So you were kind of effectively cut off. Now this thing can just fling you, like where I am now is like 15 jumps into low sec. So like I'm not really worried about camps. Obviously there are going to be people that will fight you in these sites, and because the rats do scramble you and point you, you are kind of a sitting duck for those 6 to 10 minutes that you're in there.
I do have a tip. If you're going to low sec, the aggressor is more likely to get aggro because the NPCs have been shooting you for a minute. They know that they can't tank you, and they tend to lock onto the new person.
They also dislike E-War, and pointing you counts as E-War. So if somebody comes in and points you, sometimes it annoys the rats because E-War is happening. I hate it.
Yeah. They also really hate drones, and they'll break locks on you to kill the drones, and that includes breaking the points. So if you need to boogie out pretty quickly, just throw out your drones, throw them on something. The NPCs will throw to your drones, and you might, not guaranteed, of course, you might have enough to break out and run away.
I've had a lot of interesting fights in the PvE guild and the PvE Vagabond that I have. It has no points or anything, but because the NPCs tend to help it, because it has no E, doesn't even have a web. They really don't really. They tend to go for the aggressor, and it makes for some really interesting situations.
Yeah, you can definitely have some good fights if you're not into PvE at all. There's a lot of people out, especially in the low sec ones, you can travel through as a PvPer, go through, find these sites. If they're showing up on the overview, that means someone has, gone into the scanner and kind of warped to it, similar to how faction warfare plexes work. So that means someone's at least tried to warp there. So you know that that's a potential spot to get a good fight or get ganked or something. But it's a good way to kind of merge the play styles of PvE and PvP. And as Hateless was saying, if you're going into this, having a fit that can deal with other players is very nice. Or you can just bring friends with you. That's ended up what I ended up doing. The first night they came out, me and 3 other people, we just went into one of the systems. The filaments weren't out yet or seeded yet, so we just flew the old-fashioned way. Went in there and we just all started doing each one by ourselves. And if like a bad guy came into local or hostile came into local to shoot us, we'd all warp in and gang up on that guy. So it was a neat little setup, great way to do it. The most efficient way, of course, is to do it with multiple people. But I highly suggest you guys do run these sites. We were talking last week about how there are lots of possibilities to make money in EVE, even during like this time of austerity and resource redistribution. And like this more than ever just makes me feel that CCP is not really nerfing income streams, but they're nerfing like institutional knowledge of how to make ISK and EVE, and they're also nerfing like large groups of people doing the same thing. But for individuals, there definitely is avenues to make money. I was talking before the show, I looted like 15 bill worth of stuff in terms of boxes. That's not even including the implants, which are probably never going to sell. But yeah, you can make a good amount of money, and I just got bored.
I do want to add to the site that there's data scanning, so you can do exploration with it, and the low sec exploration is really fun. You can do it in a stereo, and then the mining sites are actually gated, so you can't bring anything in there that isn't an industrial ship. It only allows industrial ships in the mining sites.
So like 2 things. First, with the industrial sites that only allow the mining ships and the haulers, I've heard a lot of stories of like epic fights between like a Procure and a Nearest in these things happening, because combat ships can't get in. So there's like a lot of like battle barges and like battle like Nearests and stuff with the drones going in, and like just epic fights between these industrial ships. But what I wanted to iterate on the point Elise made, that they're not so much nerfing the ways of making income as much as they are changing it to a commodity-based income. A lot of the income from this event comes from things that drop that you then sell. And there's been a lot of stuff introduced that make a lot of money from stuff you sell recently, like the world arcs that are now in POCVEN that used to be in the final liminal ally systems before POCVEN, you can make billions and billions and billions and billions of ISK from these things, but it's all like officer drops and like industrial supplies that you sell that you have to wait for you to sell. It's not so much just an ISK faucet going into your wallet. It's commodity. It's going to be like a commodity-based marketplace, I think, and I think this is in line with a lot of these changes that they've made.
I will say for this site, for these things, I don't even count the implant drops as like part of the income, because I'm not really sure what they're going to level out at. But they do have a lot of the overseer effects, which make up a lot of the bounty for them if anyone's run them. The skins are also pretty cool. One of the funnier bugs that has existed, or that peeped into the game for just one day, these things, they don't just drop the Rapture implant sets. They drop like just fancy Sanchalute. So they'll also drop the Nirvana implants. They'll drop like a Succubus BPC or a Phantasm BPC or a Nightmare BPC. But there was a mistake where they were accidentally dropping Nightmare BPOs instead of the BPCs. So a few very, very lucky and fortunate people ended up getting a BPO for a day. It was considered an exploit as soon as CCP figured it out. And they were all removed the next day, including the people that tried to do very clever maneuvers to hide their BPOs, such as putting them into like research or throwing them into asset safety and hoping no one would look. I'm not going to say I did that, but I definitely did that.
Didn't work?
It did not work.
They were all replaced though, correct?
They were given BPCs, yeah.
Anything special about the BPCs? Did they say anything at all? Like, okay, you get 2 runs instead of 1, or it's just a 1?
Only the lonely.
How'd you get in on that so fast?
Whenever these sites come out, I'm like always the first one to try and do them. I love them so much. I love these events just because I just like doing things to make ISK and EV, even though I don't need the ISK. That's like been my goal this year, is to see how much money I can make doing dumb stuff. And this was one of them.
I think you live outside of your comfort zone. Like that's where you're, you're constantly, we're exact opposites. Like I can't go out of my comfort zone and you live outside of yours. That's funny. All right. Anything else on this patch that you want to go over before we move on to the next subject? Suitonia, is there anything else that you liked about this patch or didn't like?
Well, there's 2 changes that I am really, really, really happy about. So the first one is they changed it so when you get potted now, it removes your PvP timer.
Yeah, that's really nice, because when you shoot somebody, you have a 15-minute cooldown to yeet, right? So if you get killed, you can just yeet instantly instead of sitting around in a station waiting for the timer to tick down. It's the Capsulator log-off timer.
Great. Was there another one? Right.
Yeah, there's also another one. They actually fixed like a really long-standing bug that used to be a massive pain in the ass if you were a scout for a gang or just solo PvP roaming. When you jump into a system, like the signal overlay thing would almost always bug out in any system that had like more than like 20 structures or anomalies, and like they wouldn't like load up properly, so you wouldn't be able to like mouse over and like warp to them. You'd have to like turn off your sensor overlay, then re-turn it on again every system to like make them appear correctly. And it was so annoying if you were like descanning like an anom or an area, and then you find out where that person is, but then you can't right click the anom to warp to it because it didn't load properly. But they fixed that now. Now all of them are loading correctly, so I'm really happy they did that.
Yeah, that was always annoying. You would always have to like try and click them on and off, and then by then you lost the element of surprise, and people had been saved up and are alerted to your presence.
So the other change is the character creator.
Yes. So let's move over to the character creator. Arsia, tell us about that.
All right. So for most of us, we'd never noticed this, but sometimes with some new accounts, there seems to be a change to the character creator that is linked to the bug that we talked about the other day. For anybody who has been aware of a bug that's happened since the patch where if you look at another character of a different bloodline, they appear, like if you look at them in the full body viewer, like you click on the portrait, you view portrait, and then you view full body, they will appear as though they were your bloodline, even if the character is not of your bloodline. So a lot of people had a lot of fun. It's one of the funnier harmless bugs that has ever been in EVE. But somebody noticed today or yesterday that there's some updates to the character creator for new accounts. So when you, sometimes with some new accounts, not all of them, it brings a new character creator where it doesn't give as much information about the empires. And then instead of picking a specific bloodline, you pick from various face choices that basically make you one of the bloodlines, but it doesn't give any context as to the bloodlines. This leads to some pros and cons where, like, you can make a Conned character who went to Republic military school, whereas that wouldn't be possible before. It still has all of the clothing and tattoos that are race locked to based on like the bloodline that you pick. But it doesn't like give any context as to what you're actually picking. So it's going to be hard for a lot of newer players to get into like the world and the lore, because it's kind of like sweeping a lot of the flavor under the rug as far as like the bloodlines and the various factions and nationalities in the game go. So, like, I think it's a good thing that you can make a character that breaks the stereotype, but I think it's a bad thing when, like, lore and story flavor gets hidden from new players who deserve a shot at seeing this if that's something they like.
I think it's just weird that it went live on TQ before it went on the test server, and we heard nothing about it, right? It just was like, it wasn't even like a line item somewhere in like buried in a patch note, like, you might get a new character creator. No, it's just there. It just shows up one day without anyone mentioning any reason for it. I think that's really peculiar, especially when we were just talking about like an hour ago how great it was to see that CCB were reacting to changes in the community and being vocal about it, saying, "Oh, we heard this. You didn't like this. We're changing it. Here's why. We're expecting to do something with it in the future. But, you know, we see how you use it and we're changing it back." And then the character creator is just like, there's a character creator. Surprise.
But it feels backwards, right? It feels like they're going the opposite direction of what the rest of the industry is doing. I think Baleful mentioned the term whitewash. And historically, EVE Online has had so much controversial stuff in the lore. And right now, the rest of the game development is catching up, right? We were just talking with Matterall about something like The Last of Us, which is very controversial, right? We have Cyberpunk coming out now, which is supposed to be quite lewd. There's plenty of games that are now being a lot more edgy and gutsy. So rolling this back and toning down the lore and removing gender, it's like, what's CCP up to? It feels backwards.
Isn't that forward thinking to removing gender?
So, like, here's the thing. A capsuleer could hypothetically make their clone look like whatever they want. Like, you could have a capsuleer who is a capsuleer and they look like one thing and they die and their next clone could be a different gender and a different race. And that would all fit within the lore. But what doesn't really work is that this isn't what an Intaki looks like. This is just phase 4. This isn't what an Amar looks like. This is just phase 6. And like, it'd be one thing if, like, it might be a precursor to changing the character resculpting, so where you can change your race and gender. Maybe that's something that's coming down the line, because that would explain some of the updates with the character creator. But it's just like, EVE is one of the best universes, like, lore-wise, that I've ever seen. It's designed to be a dark universe. Like, every faction in EVE has done so many terrible things. Like if you read the books or like the backstory or like the news articles that come out every so often, there's just like a lot of terrible things that go on in this world. And Capsuleers, like we're monsters. We're like mass murderers. Like almost every one of us is a mass murderer. And it seems just like this dark, they're like it seems like they're trying to step back from this dark universe, which I think is kind of going backwards.
For those that aren't familiar, and there is at least one person in the audience, and there's some new people that watch the show to try to catch up to what all the other players know. Character creator, Elise, I'll throw it to you since you're the summary guy. Like, what is a character creator, and why is it changed, or what does it change to?
This came with Incarna, right? So we had this really cool character creator where you would have like you choose your race, your bloodline, and even like your school that you went to and your character's background. And it changed what your character looked like. It changed what clothing options were available to them, depending on like what race you were and stuff like that.
I mean, there were bloodlines before Incarna. They had the different portrait styles and such.
Yeah. It actually came with the patch called Bloodlines. Right?
Yeah.
It's when we got the
there was
Ashura
even
characters.
there was an update that added like the Barokior and like the Akura and
the Asian races, or the Asian themed races.
Is that before they had a Chinese server?
Yeah, that was long before the Chinese server opened. I don't think they didn't add like the Asian like bloodlines to coincide with like the Chinese release or anything. It was just what they did at the time.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite like Flash videos from Eve that Maccloud just put up. It was really good. Anyways, so now with the new character creator, which is only showing up on new accounts.
Some new accounts, not even all.
Yeah.
It's not even all. It's just certain new accounts. It's probably tied to the tutorial that you get as well, because there's 2 different tutorials. You either get the old one or the new one, depending on what you are. I think it's a 50-50 roll. So I'd imagine it's tied to that as well.
There's also I've noticed that some people who drop their corp haven't been dropping to the same NPC corps anymore. They drop back to their school corp. So like, when you drop a corp, you get put into an NPC corp, and it used to be something that was tied to your bloodline. Like True Amar would go into Visium, a Sebiester would go into Sebiester tribe, but we've seen people drop back to the school NPC corp that they chose before, which is also a big change because there are some aspects of the game that need certain corp standings. Like for the Minmatar Epic arc, you need Brutor tribe standing. But Brutor tribe is an NPC corp that Brutor characters get dropped to. So if you shoot Brutor characters in PvP in Losak, you lose standing to the Brutor tribe. So that made doing the Minmatar Epic arc more of a pain in the butt if you PvP'd. So that's a significant gameplay affecting change where the corps that you drop back to when you drop your corporation.
So I was saying, so now like when you go through the character creator, if you get that lucky or unlucky roll, you can choose, you just choose your gender, I think it is, and then you can just cycle through faces, and the faces are loosely tied to what the bloodlines used to be before, and you know the hairstyles are locked to the faces, which is a little bit
hairstyles,
strange.
clothing, and tattoos. So like I feel bad for like a new player who wants to roleplay, who would get this choice and like choose Minmatar as their, like you see they choose like Minmatar as their empire. And Minmatar have the Minmatar races have specific facial tattoos that are really important in Minmatar culture. But they might choose Minmatar as their empire and just choose like arbitrarily just one of the unlabeled faces and then not get the actual Minmatar cultural tattoos for the character, and then like later find out about this, like the Minmatar have these tattoos, and then realize even though they picked Minmatar as their race, they wouldn't have access to that. It'd be one thing if like everybody could just have like all of the clothes and all of the tattoos and all of the like sunglasses, like cue the meme that Amara can't wear sunglasses, right? But that's not what this is. This isn't a broadening of choices. Broadening of choices, like that'd be fine because there are going to be people who break stereotypes. But this is, you have the same restrictions, but no context for the choices you make. And when you make choices without context, you sometimes make choices that you regret.
I mean, you could absolutely make the case that, you know, this is makes it easier to get into the game, and then you can choose your lore from there, because, you know, all the decisions you make in a character creator, I've seen people, especially newer players, spend hours making decisions and then thinking those decisions mattered in any way. They're like, oh, I chose a Galente from University of Kylie, and then I have to be like a university. I have to train science skills. I have to fly Galente and stuff like that. And then they realize once they get into the game that they can just do anything they want anyways. I could see someone making the case that that's cumbersome and unnecessary. But the thing is, and I guess the issue here is, there wasn't even a case to be made. Like, no one even put this out into the ether. It just showed up one day.
So like,
I was going to just real quick, one of the more curious things about this is when I was on the CSM in CSM 6 and CSM 7, we were demoed by the art team a new like element to the character creator where you could merge races together. You can merge genders together, including Jovian facial expressions and stuff like that. And they went through this whole, there was like a sliding scale. If you wanted to be like part Intaki, part Cybester, you could like slide it around between those two and do some cool things. You can make some very, very like amazing character portraits.
Wow.
But I just never saw the light. And this wasn't like a concept. They actually had it fully functional. They used it to make, and I might be wrong here, but they used it to make some in-game characters, like NPC characters and stuff like that.
Like, the thing is, you say that like some of these choices don't matter, but like there's hundreds of role-playing players in EVE Online, and a lot of us do, these things do matter to us. Like, there are wars fought over in-character stuff. There are corporations and alliances that form around these in-character stuff. People base their gameplay off of like in-character motivations and things that are tied to the world. And I think that a lot of just like, there's just a lot of things recently that make it feel like a lot of our concerns aren't being addressed. Like, if you go to eveonline.com right now, you cannot navigate from eveonline.com to the fiction portal. You cannot navigate from eveonline.com to the world news that CCP Delegate Zero does a fantastic job with, giving us stories and context to the world events and things that are going on. And I think these things should be front and center. I know that I have heard that CCP has plans on revamping and addressing these things, but like, it's been so long, and it's just like all this wonderful content is hidden unless you have somebody like a player to point you to exactly where it is and explain everything about it for you. And a lot of people don't have that.
So hold on, I've got my push chat going on chat. We completely glazed over it when you guys were talking about this being some people and not other people. No, it's tied to 2 different MPE experiences. How long has that been happening?
I think
they've
that's
been
just
readjusting it every 3 months or so. I think they've been keeping an eye on the MPE. Like it's definitely not as
NPE is a new player experience for those who don't know.
Yeah, and that's I believe that's why they're testing it. Right, they're doing A/B testing. So like some accounts don't get the new character creator, and other accounts do, because they want to test to see like how much of an impact it has on like new players getting into the game. It's like maybe removing a lot of the like reading and all of the things that seem like they're important choices, or they're not, might end up bringing more characters into the game. Or, you know, it could also have a detrimental effect where like less people see the lore and they don't get as invested in the game. So that's why they're doing like A/B testing, right? So they can like see if the people on the A path, which gets the character creator, end up getting like more of them get into the game, versus the B path, which has the lore and the cool stuff that might also bring people into the game.
So do players get to opt in or opt out of this? Or
No,
just completely
it's random. It's random. So like when you start a new account, you either get the A track, which is the new character creator, or you get the B track, which is the old one.
Yeah, that's how they're testing to see how it works.
if I rolled like 2 or 3 character, or well, probably 4 or 5, knowing luck, I would get both experiences.
Yeah, most likely, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and you would get both character creators.
Yeah. So Hateless, so that you know, one of the things that CCP is focused on is veteran affairs, which is rebalancing the game. That's what the whole resource scarcity, austerity, whatever you want to call it, is about. The other team that's really hard at work is about the funnels of people getting into the game. When do they stop and why do they stop? And removing just 1 or 2 aspects of that at a time. To do that, they have to constantly test, and they're doing that with new players constantly. So the NPE is a constant experiment these days. As Suitonia said, every 3 months they're changing it to rework it to see what works better, getting people to stay a little bit longer and then a little bit longer and then a little bit longer.
Yeah, I do know that they've had a high value on player retention, because the EVE Online player retention rate is...
Well, early player retention. Yeah, this is... Yeah. I don't know if it is player retention, but it's early, like the first hour, then the first day, or the first 6 hours, then the first day.
Yeah, well, that first day, it's confusing, combobulating. Like, what in the hell is going on? Why do these guns even... What's even happening? Like, it's confusing, and doing that right is important. But the player retention is incredibly important.
Well, and that's why Elise was saying, like, or I think it was Suitonia, that sometimes there's too much reading material at the beginning and people get turned off by that. But that's why Aura now is fully voiced, right? Isn't that one of the changes that?
Yeah, that is one of the changes that was in this note, and I was kind of happy to see that.
So I'm sure that was tested, or I'm not sure, but I assume that was tested. It tested well, and they said, let's push that to the rest of the game. Now, everybody that starts will be voice talked through the beginning.
Okay, and they're trying 2 variants of the new thing. Okay, got it.
I suspect that the character creator, like the reason we didn't get a dev blog about it or not, is exactly what Suitonia mentioned, right? It's one of those things that they're trying just to see what it does, and then they're either going to push it out and hopefully let us know, or they're going to just say, this didn't cause any change. Let's go scrap this. CCP have said in the past, every time we've talked to them this year, every time they've said anything this year, one of the underlying, or actually overlying ideas is we are very much all about trying things out and then just to see kind of what happens, right? CCP Ratati said it, CCP Sykes said it, pretty much anyone that you ask at CCP, like they've been emboldened with this power of science in a way, right? They're just saying, hey, wonder what happens if we do this. And this does strike me as one of those changes. At the same time, I can see why people are have trepidations about it. Like they don't want this to be the new normal without even a discussion.
Right. Well, I think there's probably a cautious nature to CCP when the team is working with new players. They don't want old players influencing that process as much. This doesn't mean anything to them. They're already bought in and retained. So I think that's not something you need to surface to the rest of the player base, because it's just a feature that doesn't really affect them. They're not going to go through it with an alt normally, but sometimes. Caleb, I wanted to get your thoughts on this stuff. What do you think of not only the bug that happened, but the idea that CCP, you already said that you think they're actually going backwards. They're not being more edgy, making more decisions that are interesting.
Well, we're coming up on quite a long time now, right? And when we started playing EVE Online way back in 2003, it was really exciting to see that lore. It was very edgy. It was very dark. It was very in your face. It was very, well, maybe not cyberpunk, but it was somewhere in between a cyberpunk universe and a World of Darkness universe. It was really goth, right? Blood and gore and religion and race and all these things were in there in the lore. And now it feels like they're moonwalking back from that and glossing it over and hiding it and not putting it front and center. Of course, it's a lot of work to do good lore, but I think the controversy of the underlying lore in EVE Online is what makes it really exciting, because it is not in your face. It's not like heads being chopped off in Valhalla or people exploding in Cyberpunk 2077. It's not gratuitous violence. It's ethics, it's drama, it's human behavior, and of course, in the old day when it was really a little bit difficult to get to because it was mainly the chronicles and reading a lot of text, right? But it is really so well made, and I think it's again one of those examples where I think CCP are making the wrong choices in what to put front and center. What is this game supposed to be about, and what should they focus on? Because they are trying to go ludo mechanics, entertaining, arcadey, and I can see why that might have some appeal. It's just CCP and EVE Online as a game is just not good enough to compare with other game developers out there. So they should put the unique selling point of this game that has been there from the start front and center, because this is where they win. They win on the simulation. They win on the dramatic universe where role playing might actually make sense, right? Because running around role playing in World of Darkness is 10 times more entertaining than role playing in World of Warcraft, right? It's just about what type of universe, and it's the same with EVE Online. So I don't understand why they never made a pen and paper version, because this universe is maybe the best, as Baleful said, that has ever been made in RPG history.
So the thing about the lore and how it's always been like a dark, grimdark universe based on like human behavior and ethics is
and ethnics.
And ethnics, yes. There's a lot of like racially charged issues in EVE Online. Is that a lot of that lore still exists. Like CCP Delegate Zero is the lore dev, and he does a wonderful job with the news stories. Like anybody who is in the Mar Mimitar war zone or interacts with it knows about the Flossiswin war that happened last year. It was about it started in response to player action, where an NPC came and ordered for the Amar to start actively slaving on the planet of Flossiswin 4 in the war zone, which was a new like escalation. Before Flossiswin, the Empress announced the whole time of two swords, the era of two swords, the Pax Ikilzi-Do, to replace the Pax Amaria, to move away from the era of peace to the era of two swords, getting rid of the Heteran decree and basically militarizing the empire even more, making the empire less peaceful for on the Amar side, right? So like a lot of the lore has actually been escalating recently. The Triglavians coming in and taking planets and people being stuck behind on these planets. That's like a terrible world. Like Skarkon, one of the systems that was lost to the Triglavians, was terribly lore important. There was like a giant war between angels and like war clones going on on the planets of Skarkon, as the Triglavians came in and took them over in the middle of this gigantic war. Like the universe is as dark as it ever was been, but it's just not as prominently featured as it once was. CCP Delegate Zero is fantastic and has been keeping EVE true to form in a lot of ways, even though a lot of people, myself included, don't agree with like everything that's every bit of new lore, new change, or new direction. But if the devs make the Triglavians because they just think the Triglavians are cool, and the lore dev has to work with that, right?
Well, we may have. Sorry, finish your point.
It's a matter of not that like the world has changed, but the world is there and it's being hidden, right, from players who should have an easier way of getting into it if they want to do so. Like, if you are just looking inside the game, it's hard to find this. You have to go outside the game to find this.
So in this, we'll broaden this out to a broader discussion here in a second. And Suitonia and Hateless might not agree with what I'm going to say next, but Caleb, the idea that CCP, because stories are eternal, so it's not like stories are outdated, right? They've been around a long time, and lore are stories. So is it CCP moving towards, look, this is electronic entertainment and moving away from simulation and story? Is that what's happening?
I just feel like it's Disneyfying. It's going to this.
There seems to be a lot of fan service, right? Which Disney is really good at. They give you what you want.
I'm fine with that. It's just that sure, you can have fun watching The Mandalorian or something PG, but if you want deep stories, controversy is part of that, right? It's really it's the core of interesting stories. If you go back and whether you look at original classics about mothers getting their children killed, or
every time
incest, or fratricide, it's like, okay, the point is that back in the day in EVE Online, we were basically thrown things like cannibalism, vampirism, slavery, religious zealotry. It's like all these things were just thrown in our face, and it's like, here you go, this is the universe you live in. And now I don't feel like I see it. And then they bring something like the Triglavian. Sure, it's okay written. It's just there's no controversy really. I don't see why it's an interesting story. It's lucky that the EVE Online players are actually making the interesting stories, because we create the controversy, we create the tribalism, the hatred, the backstabbing, the cheating, all the things that make stories entertaining. There is no catharsis if there is no drama and trauma.
Anyway, so the thing is, one of the best aspects of the EVE story is that it's not some independent thing that you can't interact with. Everything you do is part of the EVE story. Like the same scope video that talked about Triglavians invading and what Zoria Triglav said also talked about the war between Test and Goons. There were tickers about fights between Usher Khan and Lumen. Things that happen in game are things that happen in the world, the same way things that happen in the news are things that happen in the world. And things that you do in the game can affect things that happen in the news and directions the game story goes. Like the Empress of Amar was chosen in the Amar tournament, where players battled to decide that. There are things like way back when they used to have live events, there were all the Sancha events. There was live events when like the Minmatar Republic invaded the Galente Federation in Koleli. And there are all these things that players used to and still do interact with. But back in the day, more people used to know about it because it was more accessible. And it seems like what Caleb said, if you don't, the story seems like less controversial if you don't, especially if you don't see what's happening. It's not that it's less controversial, it's that you don't hear about it because they try to hide from these issues.
Like, why don't they put more art into it, right? We know about the things like the Blood Raiders, and we've had these stories from way back with the actual Soylent Green, which is basically cannibalism, right? Why not put it up there? Why not create artwork? Why not create small videos? I think they are making them too PG, right? I'm not scared of these things if I'm not really engaged in the story, right? So why not put it up there? Why not make it a little bit more gory, a little bit more dramatic, and controversial? Because I think this game can carry it. And again, I know that we might have passed the point of putting lewdness and eroticism into the game, but when we get the popularity of Cyberpunk 2077, it proves that gamers are no longer 12 and 13 years old, right? They are 40 and 45. Can we get some adult content, please?
The little perverts grew up to be older perverts.
Yeah. We are adult perverts now.
Yeah. Elise, are you going to say something? Oh, go ahead.
So I do want to add that naturally speaking, humans have low attention spans. So this lore isn't going anywhere. It's not disappearing, but they are trying to appease to the average person a little bit more than the niche that is considered the EVE Online player.
So I think that they have a flawed vision of how many people are actually interested in lore, because I think a lot more are actually interested in the story.
There definitely are a lot of people interested in lore.
I think that the people who meme like, oh, Eve lore doesn't matter are maybe a lot.
They don't talk like that.
A lot fewer of them than you think. All right.
Yeah.
Lore matters, and it gives gravity and weight to what you're doing, but a lot of the lore in EVE Online is what happens between players, what happens between you and I, what happens between tests and goons. That's the lore of EVE.
There is a book out.
That is definitely part of the lore, yes.
Yeah, there's a book out this Christmas, Empires of EVE Volume 2, that'll attest to the popularity of player stories. Those are all player stories. Elise, were you going to jump in there? I might have cut you off.
No, I think the moment has passed, but yeah, I'm just enjoying it because there is like a huge element into, even if you don't role play in EVE, you are aware of the EVE lore. And I think it's so strange that they're doing this when earlier this year, actually not even earlier this year, last year even, they forced, I don't want to say forced isn't a bad word, but they had like one of the biggest story arcs the game has ever seen has been completely lore focused, right? It was about the Triglavians and stuff.
Yeah.
No, I just mean the Triglavians in general, like that whole invasion. Like that was all lore. And then they're now dialing it back. They're like kind of easing it up a little bit. It's just so strange to me that that's the direction they're going. Because one of the things that, and if you're not really into lore or roleplay or anything, you should still do this. CCP Delegate Zero, as Arsia has been singing his praise, is incredibly well deserved. He's probably not the oldest in terms of tenure at CCP, but he's close to it. I'm pretty sure he's got a sword, maybe going for sword number 2. For those that don't know, when you're at CCP for 10 years, they give you a sword.
Shouldn't they get a shield?
Yeah, maybe he'll get a shield. Who knows? But he's been doing phenomenal work and it seems, I'm sure this is not the case that he's doing it by himself, but it seems like he's doing it by himself, and he more or less reinvigorated the entire role-playing community and that whole scene by just doing what he's been doing, and it's phenomenally successful. You can pull. Sorry. Oh, you can go. I was going to say, you can pull.
So CCP Delegate Zero has done work. Like, he's looked up in our peer Wikipedia pages about their characters and found stuff about these characters' backstories, and then included bits in the news dunking on particular characters. Like, my character had her family's childhood home firebombed in a World News article, right? Like, CCP Delegate Zero has put in a lot of work in targeting, like interacting with the actual players who are into the lore, and it really shows when like a dev likes what they're doing and puts a lot of effort into it.
The thing I was going to say in terms of how popular or unpopular lore is in EVE Online, you can pull anyone that's played this game for a year or so or more, right? You can pull them out and be like, tell me what you know about the lore. They'll say, I don't know anything about the lore. I don't do the lore stuff. And then you ask them about the Amar as a race, and they'll be, oh yeah, they're the old like slave owners, right? And so they'll go through. They'll tell you the very broad strokes of the characters that exist in the game, but they're completely unaware that they have any interest in it at all. It's just they just become immersed in it and they accept like that's what it is. I'd love to see more of that. I'd love to see people being like, oh yeah, those crazy vampires or those crazy cannibals, the Blood Raiders, who knows what they're going to do next? Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, the The idea that EVE Online is a sandbox allows players to come into this world and play. And what CCP is supposed to do is create an interesting sand, right? Good texture or whatever. And it seems like when we here in the EVE media start talking about EVE Online, a lot of the times we're talking about the mechanics today, full mechanics, full of kind of the event and that kind of stuff. It's more like how you play the game, how you get the most out of the game and stuff. But ultimately, it is, I think the thing that has become very popular or was very popular about EVE Online for the longest time was just the sandbox. Anything can happen. You're in a danger zone constantly. These sorts of elements that are always there that build the friction that gets people involved with each other. They actually create those stories. And I wonder, does lore help that or does lore constrain that?
Lore definitely helps that.
So I think Ashrati put it the best. I was watching a stream one day, and he said, "It doesn't matter if you care about the lore or not. You're part of the story because you buy ships, you interact with it, and as lore is concerned, if you don't care about the lore, you're just a wild space god flying around space doing whatever the hell he wants."
You're in it whether you like it or not.
Even a lot of people who don't consider themselves RPers end up RPing in a way. Like a lot of people will be like, I'm gonna go be a pirate. That's RPing. You are like carving up a niche for yourself, and sometimes you make decisions based on, I want to be a pirate. I want to keep a -10, even though that has negative consequences for me, because I want to be -10 because it's a badge of honor. That's an RP choice, you know. It is you're making a choice that specifically has a detrimental effect on you because of the flavor of it, right?
Yeah. And funny thing, and this will be the last point on this, EVE Online used to be known, it's not so much anymore, but the best PvPers were actually our peers. Maybe it is still that way, Arsia, you correct me if I'm wrong. But early on, our peers were not your typical RPers in this game. They're actually pretty ruthless at the game. They're really good at it.
Elise, have you ever won against our peers in a tournament?
Not in a role play? No,
moving on.
Probably not, actually.
Well said. All right. Oh, I wanted to do a whole third hour and go through all the year in development for CCP. I wrote it in the show notes. I think you can see it there now. But I don't know if we have time for that. What do you guys want to do? Well, first, let's do this. Let's talk about some war news, and we'll skip through it really quick because today was kind of a quiet week, right, Elise?
Yeah, it seemed to me, and maybe it's just because I was a little bit absent-minded in the war zone a bit. I'm not sure if that played a role, but it did seem a little bit more quiet. Obviously, you had a keep star dying, right? So this is part of the Pappy strategy. Take the iHub, take it over, put in your own jammer, control it completely, and then work on dismantling the keep star. And that's we just saw the blueprint for how it's going to work elsewhere. You've also seen, obviously, there's a new keep star dropped earlier this week, or maybe it was last week, late last week. I don't remember the days. The days blend together.
I think it's today. Isn't it? I don't know.
I was talking about the previous one that was dropped.
Okay.
But yeah, so you just see more and more Pappy just dismantling stuff that's existing, shooting structures. Faction Fortizars are dying, Sodios are dying, things like that are dying at a crazy pace, it feels like. You also have the initiative wreaking havoc in the backlines. They're being quite effective out in their deployment, which is amazing to see. It's what I've personally wanted this entire time from the initiative, and it's great to see that they're doing that, getting their members more motivated, more involved.
Although they did reinforce a keep star in their staging system of OTAC SHT, or known as OSHT, and they just reinforced the shield, which is rather meaningless unless you back it up with an armor timer that you defeat. And they had to stand down because they were outnumbered, I believe. So they're wreaking havoc, but they're also kept in check. They are only able to get 200 people in fleet or so.
Yeah, they're doing what a group of their size can do, right? They're not really opening another front, but they are sort of burning the fields around and becoming a nuisance, right? Being something that you have to react to. So you're not going to win the war with the initiative going into curse and shooting structures, right? That's not how this happens, but it does alleviate some pressure. It creates some fatigue. At least that's what you hope happens. And it also gives you some locker room material, right? It lets your members feel like they're doing something rather than just kind of sitting, defending iHubs, which doesn't really feel that meaningful sometimes, right? Like, oh, I saved this structure as 50 other structures died. So it's a good way to focus the initiative's strengths and let them do that, because they are, like, let's face it, they are one of, if not arguably the best, like a medium-sized group out there that can roam and do stuff like that. They're nomadic in a way, but they use wormholes. They've got some of the best roaming FCs in the game, and just putting them into a Jackdaw or a Raven and then hurling them at a Keepstar doesn't use their full potential. Let them do stuff. Let them fly. Let them burn stuff to the ground. And so it's I'm really happy to see it. Obviously, as someone in Pappy, I'm less excited because they're being effective at what they're doing, and they're not just being contained and logging off to play another game. But as someone who's a fan of EVE Online, it's great to see them have some success there. But the Imperium, they're just losing slowly more and more of Delve, or just losing structures rather. The iHubs are being constantly fought over. The ADMs are being constantly fought over to try and keep them high enough, especially if you're in the Pappy sides. There are like small fleets going out to keep those ADMs high between the shooting of the structures, and there's no signs of fatigue really. Like you can say like, oh, there's fewer people showing up. Maybe that might be the case, but people aren't getting burned out of burning these structures down. If anything, they're getting excited by it.
Yeah, it's feeling them, especially if they're dropping loot because they don't have any fuel in them. As far as there was an HIX Keepstar that was surrounded and destroyed, as you were saying before, but they've been really doing a lot of what I would call, instead of knockout punches, body blows to the region. Delve is just on fire as far as structures. We saw them go from, well, the whole empire, right, in its 3 regions was something like 4,000 structures, and it went down pretty quick after Fountain to 3,000. Then Aquarius and Period Basis fell, and it's down to like 1,800 structures, most of those in Delve. Then it's down to 1,600, then 1,200. I believe it's about 1,000 or less now, looking at just how fast they're munching through this stuff. Maybe it's 1,000, I don't know.
I think there's around 40 Keepstars left as well, and those are getting less and less as well. Who knows? At the same time, we're talking about how Pappy is like burning around Delve. That's what they have to do. They're doing what they're supposed to do. It's not like they're defeating the Imperium every time they shoot a structure. No, the Imperium, they don't care. They know what these structures were built for. They know what their space, they know the areas of value that they have in their space. Everything behind that little pocket has been completely uncontested, right? Everything behind E3O hasn't been touched. The iHubs are still there. The ADMs are still high. The Imperium are still very positive about this whole thing.
And they defended like, 1DQ very well.
Yeah, they had a great defensive 1DQ, which is what happened. We were talking about it earlier in the show a little bit. Like 2,000 Pappy came in, reinforced that iHub. They saw it was going to take an hour. In tie-dye 10 hours, and Imperium just left. They said, okay, hi, get out of my system now, go back to your side. And that's exactly what happened, right? They threw up the jammer, all that stuff went down. So the Imperium are still, they're taking these body blows, as you call them, but they're not bending over, they're not dying, they're not breaking, they're not saying, oh, this is the worst. They're almost relishing the fact that this happens. Also, I do want to give a shout out to Pappy forces who were staging in T5Z, which is where their coalition staging. They haven't really made a mistake there ever since that first couple days, where it was a little bit shakier. You lost the Revenant, you lost I think 2 Titans in there. You lost a couple of other things. They very much stabilized. They understand what it means to be living next to your enemy, and they understand just exactly how strong the Imperium still are. So they're not giving up easy kills. They're not screwing up. They're not making mistakes. They're going back to that nose of the grindstone, composed, methodical, like go through and just destroy stuff play style.
Right. And so the Imperium, on the other hand, has taken away, they've moved their identity from the land to the people. So Imperium won't be defeated because the people will stick together. And that's a good defense against, like, your entire kingdom is burning down. Well, it doesn't matter. That's just brick and mortar. Like, we are the kingdom. We are the people. So there's a lot going on in this war day after day. It started July 4th, July 5th, and here we are. And there has been a lot of activity this entire time with some flashpoints that have really lit up the sky and made the biggest battles in EVE Online. We'll talk about one of those now. The biggest battle in EVE history was the FWST, I believe. And that CCP just released the dev blog. We'll paste it in here now so you can check that out. I don't know if you want to pull that up, Maccloud. It's the Fury at FWST. Wait, is this new or has this come out before? I think they talk about the technical aspects of the battle, whereas, yeah, because this came out on the 13th today. This is the battle report. They did make a scope video about it before to highlight what was going on, but this really breaks down the entire battle. They did one of these for BTAC-R, for instance, and also 9GC or whatever. The biggest battles in EVE get these. So you should check those out. All right.
Yeah, it is very cool. But as you mentioned, it is very interesting to see if you just take a step back, if you haven't been watching the week-to-week progressions, just how the narratives have shifted, especially on the Imperium side. They've been doing fabulous at kind of managing their members' morale. I remember in the very beginning, it was Delve is a fortress. You're never going to breach it. Quickly writing on the wall is that that might end up happening. True. Yeah, as soon as time happens. So it became Delve is a quagmire where you will step foot and die, right? So we've seen that before, and then like a new iteration of that is kind of like Delve, almost to the point that Delve is an idea, you can't kill it. So you see how they're kind of taking what Pap you're throwing at them and just like turning it a little bit and then just pushing it right back out. I'm sure it's incredibly frustrating because you've never seen an alliance or a coalition lose so much infrastructure. They're losing so much just in terms of raw ISK, and they're completely unfazed. Just absolutely could not care less. They're like, oh, great. You wasted some ammo shooting our cool Keepstar. Good job, nerd. Like, it's fabulous to see how
does
both
your fist hurt from hitting me in the face?
Yeah. It's just so great to see how both these alliances are managing everything. And if you just look at the raw numbers, they're just as high, if not higher, for both sides from when this whole thing started, from when these FWST fights were going down, where these huge 12-hour Keepstar brawls were going, these big super fights, and you're getting nothing. They're just nothing in terms of like huge like capital slugfest. What you are seeing is a lot of every 30 minutes, every hour, there's like a little fight on a gate. There's a skirmish somewhere off. There's like a roaming gang that's going through and hitting in the back. It's so cool just to see how this is very much turned into an actual like war zone where you're afraid to go like one step out of where you stage without like an armed escort.
Yeah. Well, we've got to wrap up today, but next week we'll go through a lot of the entire year. I guess we're still doing holidays, so this is year-end wrap-up stuff. It happens so quickly that we have to do like our most talking in stations, basically the MVPs of the year. And this year we're going to do something a little bit different. We have most influential player, of course, most influential organization, whether it be an alliance or corporation. But we're going to do most influential patches, most influential moments, and we're going to broaden it out to give more awards to people as we've seen them. So it's our perspective and our community's perspective, and we're going to make it something that you can participate in too with nominations. And then the staff from TIS will vote on who the winners are. And we'll announce that on the 30th, or actually, yeah, on the 30th, we'll have a special show to talk about that. But we are getting to the year end. What's up, Caleb?
Oh, I just think that if we're doing year in review stuff, we should really see if Convict wouldn't drop in on us and talk about his experiences and the CCP side of things. Because year in review is supposed to be this New Year fun thing, and I just think that Convict might actually like to join.
He'd be fantastic. Yeah, he's great, and he loves the old school and has a great appreciation for for history and the chronology of Eve. We'll definitely try to get him in on it. All right.
They didn't get the trailers that we're used to, right? So we're kind of missing out this year.
Well, that might still come, right? They released a trailer last year that showed the what was it? Your progression. Like they made a video that had informed by data. So the data told you Elise Randolph, number 6 in tragic losses in Jita or something, or number 6 PvPer in the Amatar region or something. I don't know. They had different things, which was kind of cool.
That was a nice little wrap-up type thing.
I actually put all of my accounts onto one email so that
would happen.
All my accounts tied together. Yeah.
Elise, what were you saying?
I was gonna say, yeah, that whole year in review thing was really fun, like a neat little cinematic for it.
So like in the RB community, when they had that year in review, people were like posting, "I got you as my nemesis," and everybody was like excited, excited squeeze. I got sent screenshots of people who got me as their nemesis. I guess that means I killed them. I think a bunch, but
yeah.
Get a small video made of all the times that Baleful was actually burning Elise, because I think they were really funny. I had fun every single time that was done.
Oh, poor Elise.
I love Elise.
It was a very great experience. I'm glad, right? Because without that happening, I would never really know anything about Baleful or Arsia.
Yeah,
So
that's when we met in Iceland in 2016 after the tournament. Yeah, I didn't know who you were, so I'm glad that we met because you're a cool friend.
It's funny because Elise actually has at least 2 highlights for me for this year. One was when he got burned by Baleful, and the other was when he was called an initiative shill.
Those were very, very big highlights. I quite enjoyed it. 2020 was very good to me, considering I haven't really been doing anything. I've just been kind of like a fly on the wall.
Yeah, but there's some things going on that wall. Yeah, right. Okay. Listen, I'm going to give you, if you like EVE Online and want to have news inside the game, right now in chat, I've posted how you can get your EVE Online newspaper from Talking In Stations, because we deliver. So I'll give you the news of the day inside the game on the mailing list, TIS News. So check that out if you can. There's some instructions on how to do that. And if you want more out of your EVE Online, you want to come to Talking In Stations Discord. There's 4,000 people on it now. We finally broke that. And a lot of discussion and a lot of places to get help. We have a whole help channel, recruiting channels and that sort of stuff. So hang out with us on Talking In Stations Discord. I'll put that out now. And thanks, guys, for coming around again for this weekend report, weekend review. Suitonia, Arsia, Elise, Hateless, Caleb was with us today. And of course, our engineer who puts all the stuff up, Maccloud. Thanks for helping us out. We will go back to what we were doing in EVE Online, and we will see you next week on Talking In Stations.